Welcome to the Jewish People's Shul Hanukkah class. We'll be talking about Netanyahu, King Netanyahu, and the Maccabean rebellion against him. So we'll get started with our slides and songs.
Andale. The song. How about the song?
Oh Hanukkah, oh Hanukkah, the sweet celebration. Around the feast we gather in complete jubilation. Happiest of seasons now is here. Many are the reasons for good cheer. Together, whatever tomorrow may bring. So hear us rejoicing and merrily voicing the Hanukkah song that we sing. Oh, hear us rejoicing and merrily voicing the Hanukkah song that we sing.
Okay, so that was the Hanukkah song. That was from the 1959 movie of The Diary of Anne Frank review. We'll be lighting the Hanukkah candles. Then we're going to be talking about Netanyahu. We'll be discussing who Netanyahu is and his Likud party, along with, after that, talking about the roots of Netanyahu's ideology, and that is revisionist Zionism. His father was a big revisionist Zionist, and the leaders of that movement were Zev Jabotinsky, so we'll be talking about him, and Menachem Begin. Then finally, in the time that we have left, we'll be talking about the liberators, the Maccabean, modern-day Maccabeans, the liberators against Netanyahu's oppression. And we'll be basically talking about Hadash, mentioning the PLO and the labor forces around that. So first, let's just celebrate the Hanukkah festival. And what we'll do is have a little quote-unquote secular prayer. And I'll ask someone to stand up here to light the menorah.
These lights which we kindle recall the wondrous triumphs and the miraculous victories wrought through our ancestors from ancient days until our time. These lights are sacred through all 8 days of Hanukkah. We may not make use of their light, but are only to look upon them and thus be reminded to find solidarity with all oppressed people against tyranny.
To the far right. Okay, thus begins the Hanukkah miracle. I don't think it's going to be lasting for 8 days, this light, but let's see if it lasts for the entire hour and a half of our class as we continue on. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. Oh, it's a little bright, but let me turn off that light. Well, I think it looks better. So there we go. Let us continue. Next, I'll ask.
Yes, welcome, happy Hanukkah, friends. So yes, we decided Hanukkah was a perfect time to have our theme. That we are living in some dark times, but with progressive politics, there is light and hope ahead. The origins of Hanukkah and the Maccabean Jewish rebels fighting against the tyrannical king Antiochus symbolize the struggle of an oppressed people against national chauvinism, which declares one people as superior to their neighbors. Just like we oppose the oppression of the Jewish people by King Antiochus, we also oppose the oppressive policies of King Netanyahu against the peoples of Palestine and Israel. The heroism of the Maccabees represent those today who struggle against the growing threat of fascism and Europe and the world. Maccabean bravery is also represented today by those who resist the economic and social occupation of one people by another. Today's struggle against the economic oligarchy that rules over our people traces its roots to the Maccabean Jewish rebellion. Hanukkah is also called the Festival of Lights. More than ever, we need it today to shed light from the darkness of reaction to the light of fraternal peace and mutual respect.
Thank you, Tyler. And so now we will play a video. Unfortunately, Professor Barry Lituchy, who's been in or other classes, couldn't attend today. So that's unfortunate. But he said that we could also play an earlier video from one of our first classes that we had as the UJPFO, that he really tied the story of Hanukkah into modern day liberation struggles. So I'm going to go ahead and play that.
Hi there. Happy Hanukkah, everyone. Call me Barry, please. Hanukkah is a good time to reflect on anti-imperialist struggle. Hi there. Happy Hanukkah, everyone. Call me Barry, please. Hanukkah is a good time to reflect on anti-imperialist struggles and national liberation struggles because actually the rabbis have it all wrong. What Hanukkah was about was a struggle of the Jewish people to maintain their identity, but also their independence from the oppression of the Seleucid Greek kingdom. It's also, it was really a self-liberation that took about 3 years of guerrilla warfare led by Mattathias and his 5 sons, who were called the Maccabees, and which means the hammers, and they led the military struggle against the Greek Seleucid army that was trying to force the Jews to forcibly convert to Greek paganism at that time and give up Jewish identity altogether. And the Maccabees won the war. And of course, the famous story is that the oil that they thought would last for 1 day lasted for 8. And so that's why we have 8 candles to light and 8 days of Hanukkah. But it was really not a religious war. Well, it was a religious, yeah, of course they were trying to uphold the Jewish religion, but also their Jewish identity from a forced oppression. So it was a kind of national liberation struggle, which ended ironically also on the 25th day of the month. That was in 165 BCE. And the story is interesting because later on the Jews thought that they could fight a similar. It reestablished a Jewish state because when the Seleucids were defeated, the Romans backed the independence of Judea as under the Maccabees, which became known as the Hasmonean dynasty, which lasted for about 160 years. No, not quite, 130 years, and then was replaced by Roman kings, including King Herod, and then, of course, was abolished altogether when Judea became a province of the Roman Empire. And then the Jews thought that they could fight a similar type of national liberation struggle against the Roman Empire, but that one didn't turn out so well. That was the first Jewish war and the second Jewish war, the first Jewish war from 66 to 73, where they destroyed the temple, and of course the Zealots committed mass suicide at Masada. And then you had the second Jewish uprising or Jewish revolt against the Roman Empire in 132, which lasted a couple of years. And after that, the Romans forcibly expelled the Jews from Judea, and that began what was known as the diaspora. So that's very important to Jewish history. And Hanukkah really is a national liberation struggle, and I think an inspiration even to anti-imperialist struggles as well.
Okay, thank you, Barry. I know you're not here with us, but we appreciate that. And so there we go. We're going to break for our first round of discussions about Hanukkah. Anything that anyone has to say about this Festival of Lights? Go ahead.
I'll make it quick. The diaspora, I'll just start with that. When the Romans destroyed the temple, the Romans were the occupiers, and they destroyed the temple, a symbol of Jewish national identity at the time. And what happened is that the Jews were then scattered around the planet, around the whole world. So they didn't have one country anymore. Until, I want to mention this now, until the Soviet Union came into existence. You should all know this, that during the period of Lenin and Stalin, they set up a Jewish autonomous state in a place called Azerbaijan, which is inside Russia and Siberia area, but it's a quite good arable area. And they set up Azerbaijan, which was the first Jewish national state since the destruction of the Roman temple. So it was not Israel. People think it was Israel. It was Azerbaijan. Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you for that addition. Thank you for that context. Appreciate it. Okay, just a second. I gotta set these. Okay. Alrighty, so let's move on. Now we're talking about, let's move on to the next section. The next section is going to be filled with a lot of videos about Netanyahu. And it really goes through a portion of his life. I will send the links to these. You can view both of these on YouTube. They're each an hour long. They're very good, regardless of where they come from. They're not perfect, but I think both give a lot of good context to Netanyahu's life, the person who he is. We'll start with the first one. It is called King Bibi, which I think is aptly named. And we will start from the Oslo Accords in 1995, when Rabin, the prime minister, negotiated with the PLO, the representative for the Palestinian people in Arafat. And it goes on to about sometime after 2000. But let's just start the video, and here we go.
ערב טוב ושלום רב לכם. לפני קצת יותר משעתיים, בטקס רב משתתפים בבית הלבן בוושינגטון, חתמו ישראל ואש"ף על הסכם העקרונות להסדר עזה ויריחו תחילה.
We have come to try and put an end to the hostilities so that our children, our children's children, will no longer experience the painful cost of war, violence and terror.
Standing in Netanyahu's way is Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin, a revered general who led Israel to historic reconciliation with the Palestinians. Clinton sees Rabin as a father figure. The peace process is one of the most important projects of his presidency.
ראש ממשלת ישראל, יצחק רבין, לחץ את ידו של יאסר ערפאת, וגבעת ההפגנות מול משרד ראש הממשלה ריקה. השמיים לא נפלו.
השמיים נפלו. זה היה אירוע קשה מאוד. לדעתי אירוע של השפלה לאומית.
With Israel in a state of euphoria, Netanyahu's gloomy predictions seem detached from reality.
גבירותיי ורבותיי, שלום, סלאם,
אנחנו לבקש אותך אולי לשיר את השיר. אין סיכוי?
אל תקלקל את הערב הזה.
The press supports the peace process and Rabin. Bibi, who opposes the process, finds himself marginalized.
אלה אנשים שמאמינים בהחזרת כל סנטימטר. לא מתוך לחץ חיצוני, מתוך רצון פנימי. למסור, להיפטר, לתת. זה אפילו לא למכור, זה למסור. הם מאמינים בתיאוריה של סוף ההיסטוריה. הם באמת חושבים שמוקפים בכל המשטרים הפראיים הללו, שניתן את הגבעות ואת הערים שחולשים על ביתנו ועל עירנו, ניתן את זה לערפאת ולחבש ולחוואטמה ולכל שאר הפילנטרופים הללו, שיבוא שלום, הם מאמינים בזה. אתה שואל אותי, מה העיקר במערכה הזאת? העיקר במערכה הזאת שאני רוצה לחיות, ואיתם אנחנו לא נחיה, איתם נגיע לסכנה, סכנת קיום אמיתית. ולכן אני חרד על ביתי, על ארצי. אני אפילו חרד על בני, זה דבר חדש, יש לי תינוק קטן, אתה יודע. היום הוא נעמד אגב, בן 9 חודשים. אני רוצה שהוא יעמוד גאה במדינה הזאת, ולצורך זה אני בא אליכם, פונה אליכם, כדי שאתם תצאו מכאן עם אותה עוצמה, עם אותה חיוניות, עם אותה נכונות, להיאבק על העיקר, כי מה שעומד פה על הפרק זה העיקר, ואמרת את זה, ארץ ישראל עומדת על הפרק, וכולנו עומדים על ארץ ישראל. אני רוצה לפנות אל תנועות השמאל, וגם לנציגיהם בממשלה, שאתם תוקפים את תושבי יש"ע, אינכם תוקפים רק אותם, אתם תוקפים את רוב העם הזה. הוא דומם, זה נכון, אולי אין לו אמצעי תקשורת, נכון, אין לו תקשורת.
הפיצוץ הנורא הזה הראה באוטובוס בקו מספר 5. כנראה מטען בסדרי גודל של עשרות קילוגרמים.
Palestinian terrorists try to stop the Oslo Accords. The first suicide bombing by Hamas in downtown Tel Aviv leaves Israelis feeling helpless. News studios have no time to censor the images. Bibi is first to arrive at the scene.
I think that Mr. Rabin bears a very grave responsibility indeed. אני לא מסתגר במשרדים ממוזגים. אני חושב ששרי הממשלה, כולם היו צריכים להיות שם, לראות, לא רק לעמוד על מדשאות מטופחות, להיות שם ולראות מה באמת קורה ולהפסיק להסתתר מאחורי סיסמה.
אבל האם אין זה ניצול בכל זאת פוליטי של אירוע כל כך טרגי?
לא, אני אגיד לך יותר.
אם כן, אלה הם המראות של הפגנת ההמונים בכיכר ציון בירושלים. הקהל מאוד מאוד נסער, מאוד מאוד משולהב.
של איש הדמים ערפאת, בואו לארץ ישראל בתהלוכת ניצחון, מאובטח על ידי מאות שוטרי וחיילי מדינת ישראל. זהו שיא של מחזה האבסורד וההשפלה בניצוחה של ממשלת ישראל.
פנה אליי חבר הכנסת ויושב ראש הליכוד ונתניהו לפגישה. באתי הביתה ביום שישי אחר צהריים. ראיתי הפגנה, כתובות של הליכוד, זעקות בוגד, רוצח. אמרתי, זה הרי איוולת תהיה מצידי לשחק בצביעות של הליכוד, של יושב ראש הליכוד. הוא ישב שם ונאם תחת תמונות הגסטאפו. הוא מציע לי להיפגש, עושה הפגנות.
אתה לא תנסה לעצור את עליית הקיטור?
אני מאמין לו.
זה ילך עד הבחירות ויהיה חריף אם כך.
יכול להיות.
Truly shocking news from the Middle East tonight. Israel's Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin has been assassinated. The alleged assassin is in custody, described as a Jewish law student active in right-wing causes.
Your Prime Minister was a martyr for peace, but he was a victim of hate.
He was a man of courage, a man of vision, and he was endowed with one of the greatest virtues that any man can have. He was endowed with humility.
האם אתה יכול לומר היום שעשית די כדי להסות, כדי להשקיט, כדי לגרש את אלה שאולי הסיתו את יגאל עמיר? שצעקו רבין רוצח, רבין בוגד, שצעקו מוות לשמאלנים.
הקמפיין הזה שנועד להטריד את ראש הממשלה רבין, שבכל מקום שהוא מגיע אליו יצעקו לו בוגד ורוצח, הם אומרים,
תפסיק.
אני אשלים את השאלה, הם אומרים, והדברים פורסמו בשמם, והם אמרו שזה היה בהשראה של הנהגת הליכוד.
הניסיון שנעשה עכשיו, ולצערי יש ניסיון כזה, להדביק למחנה שלם, למחצית העם, ולמי שעומד בראשו, את האחריות לרצח. זה ניסיון נורא להשתמש בטרגדיה לאומית כדי להעליל עלילה שמטרתה להרוויח רווח פוליטי, לנצח בבחירות, או להשתיק אופוזיציה.
But then, the terrorist attacks returned.
אין לי שום ספק שאפשר לנצח את הטרור הזה, אין לי שום ספק שאפשר להדוף אחורה את הגל הזה. באמצע שנות ה-80, כשארצות הברית אימצה את המדיניות שאני הצעתי, והיא אימצה אותה, היא הביאה לכך שבעצם הטרור הבינלאומי, כפי שהכרנו אותו, נמחק מעל פני האדמה.
The ultra-Orthodox parties throw their support behind Netanyahu. They use a controversial slogan, which isolates Israel's Arab population and evokes criticism from the left. Its message will get stronger over the years. Bibi is good for the Jews.
כבוד הרב יש לו עצות פנטסטיות.
זהו רגע, גבירותיי ורבותיי, כפי שאמרנו, יש לנו בשבילכם תוצאות דרמטיות.
Half a year after Rabin's assassination, the man whose campaign was deemed a lost cause by the press ends the night as the winner.
בוא תגיד לנו איזה מילה אחת.
I hope he follows through on the agreement. But I don't know. I'm worried. I'm scared. And I'm sad.
מדינת ישראל יוצאת היום לדרך חדשה. אנחנו מאמינים שכל אזרח בישראל, מה אתם צועקים על התקשורת? הרי אמר, לא, הרי אמר אחד משרי הממשלה הזאת, הבחירות אכן הוכיחו בצורה ברורה שיש אלוהים בשמיים.
Since his election, Prime Minister Netanyahu has expressed his determination to dismantle the socialist structure that dominates Israel's economic system.
And the time has come to change Israel, to move it forward, to make it, I think, one of the great successes of the close of the 20th century, and I think
Bibi is planning an American revolution in Israel. He promises his donors rapid privatizations and unbridled capitalism.
Okay, thanks. And hold your questions and comments to after this. We still got a bit more to go. So this next video is actually a PBS documentary. It's going to start in 2008. Once again, I'll add these links at the end of the meeting so you can view them, but let's play it.
By 2008, Netanyahu was once again running for prime minister with a campaign slogan of "Strong against Hamas."
He is a great politician, and he has understood the DNA of the Israeli public. He understands that you have to look him in the eye and you have to say, I'll keep you safe.
Benjamin Netanyahu appears to have locked up the prime minister's office.
He was re-elected amid growing fear of Hamas attacks. But during the run-up to his victory, a new president had entered the White House. Netanyahu was concerned.
התנגדתי בתוקף, אני מתנגד בתוקף לחלוקת ירושלים. בתוקף מתנגד לחזרה לקווי 67. בתוקף מתנגד לזכות השיבה. ולא רק זה, תסתכל הלכה למעשה. אנחנו במשך שנים, אני עומד מול כל מסע הלחצים הזה, לא נסוגותי סנטימטר. המשכתי לבנות בשכונות של ירושלים. מעולם לא הסכמתי לחלק את ירושלים. מעולם לא הסכמתי לסגת לקווי 67, וגם לא אסכים.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's Likud party has won what's being called a stunning re-election victory.
Netanyahu's election victory emboldened his approach to the Palestinians. He would take advantage of the fact they were divided between Hamas in Gaza and the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank.
He wanted to divide, and he wanted to make sure that he doesn't have to negotiate any deal where you would connect between the territories and Gaza.
From an Israeli standpoint, it makes sense. Divide and rule, keep the West Bank and Gaza separate. That's the best way to prevent a Palestinian state. Keep them both weak, but not weak enough where they collapse.
Netanyahu made a particularly fateful gamble when it came to Hamas. With Gaza under blockade, he allowed the wealthy Gulf state Qatar to give Hamas hundreds of millions of dollars in assistance.
He allowed Qatar to pay Hamas massive bags of cash in dollars to buy quiet, to buy calmness from Hamas.
This money was spent on digging tunnels and buying rockets and producing weapons, now killing Israelis. While Netanyahu was telling us that he was our great protector, he was actually contributing, not directly, to building Hamas and making it a regional power.
Praise for the president.
Just 1 month into his term, Trump invited Netanyahu to the White House to discuss the possibilities.
For Netanyahu and his advisors, this was first and foremost a moment of opportunity. Trump seemed to them volatile, unpredictable, but perhaps unpredictable in ways that would benefit Israel.
Bibi and I have known each other a long time. A smart man, great negotiator, and I think we're going to make a deal.
Trump gave Netanyahu an early nod in his favor, saying he would be open to something other than a two-state solution.
I'm looking at two-state and one state, and I like the one that both parties like. I'm very happy with the one that both parties like. I can live with either one. Today, we finally acknowledge the obvious, that Jerusalem is Israel's capital. I am also directing the State Department to begin preparation to move the American embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem.
Both Israelis and Palestinians claim Jerusalem as their capital. If you put the American embassy there, you're seemingly putting your foot on the scale saying we take Israel's side in this.
Netanyahu is currently on trial for corruption, allegedly accepting bribes and a breach of trust.
He was embroiled in scandal, facing charges of bribery and corruption. He and his coalition government were briefly toppled.
We'll be back soon.
His own personal affairs lead eventually to 3 different indictments on criminal charges, including bribery, charges that he has always claimed are bogus and are an attempt to persecute him.
To regain power, Netanyahu courted Israel's most extreme parties.
And so for Netanyahu, he felt, I have no chance but to go to the right, even the very far right. Even parties on the extreme far right that his own Likud party had always shunned.
Some members of Likud warned him that this would be very dangerous, that the whole government would take a very dangerous ideological direction.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has inaugurated the most far-right government in the country's history.
Recently re-elected and now the head of a new far-right government,
Controversial plans to overhaul the justice system.
Netanyahu started pursuing a dramatic overhaul of Israel's judicial system that would weaken the court's power over the executive branch.
It was a sudden outpouring of rage.
Protests erupted across Israel.
Bibi is not here for the democracy. Thank you very much.
We see hundreds of thousands of Israelis in the streets, which is pretty amazing for a country of just 10 million people. And they are there week after week after week protesting Netanyahu's efforts, which they see as a threat to democracy. They see it as a power grab by the prime minister.
He's facing trial for 3 different counts of corruption. And for him, it was a life or death moment. He needed to change Israel's legal system so he could somehow stop the trial.
That led to, I would say, the biggest wave of protest in the history of the country, and probably the most severe political crisis and social crisis in the history of the country. Looking at this now, after October 7, that seems like a sweet dream for Israelis. But back then, it was the country being on the brink of civil war.
There's an Israel before October 7th, and there is an Israel after October 7th.
Israel is at war. We didn't want this war. It was forced upon us in the most brutal and savage way.
Hamas had carried out the deadliest single assault in Israel's history, and it had happened on Benjamin Netanyahu's watch.
He saw himself as the greatest protector of the state of Israel and persuaded himself and his supporters that Israel was safe and that he could handle everything.
Hamas will understand that by attacking us, they've made a mistake of historic proportions.
He would manage the Palestinian conflict without attempting to solve it. He would keep Hamas as an enemy entity, but a weak one. The problem, of course, is that he refused to accept the fact that actually some of his actions were pushing Hamas in the worst direction possible.
Israel will win this war. And when Israel wins, the entire civilized world wins.
There needed to be a more stern message about the need to operate within the constraints of international law. We are seeing unprecedented levels of civilian casualties. The vast majority of people who are killed in Gaza right now are women and children. And for what?
The bloodshed has played into Hamas's hands.
A very intense few days of protest around the world.
The humanitarian crisis from Israel's military response has brought widespread condemnation. But with Hamas still holding hostages, Netanyahu has been pushing forward.
שום לחץ בינלאומי, שום מתכות שקריות בחיילי צה"ל ובמדינתנו לא ישנו את האמונה שלנו בצדקת דרכנו ובזכותנו ובחובתנו להגן על עצמנו.
Okay, so that was the PBS documentary. So we're almost going to break for questions. We just have one more quick video. We're going to talk about the Likud party that much, but we'll take these hands just to get started. So go ahead, Doctor.
I'm sure some people here.
Yeah, I hope people notice. As I'm watching this, I wasn't seeing Netanyahu. I was seeing Trump. I was seeing Trump. The script that Netanyahu was doing is the script that Trump is playing. And it's the script, too much coincidence. It's the script of fascism. That's exactly what it is. Notice throughout the whole thing, he was attacking the left. Where have you heard that recently? Let's be honest. Was it from Kamala Harris or was it from Trump? Who was attacking the left? Marxist professors and all this crap. It was Trump.
Yeah, and I've heard it presented that that Netanyahu came into power in a turbulent time, and that's why he had to be a strong fist. However, we'll see in the next section, it wasn't an accident that Netanyahu has the policies he does. He has a whole lineage of basically pro-fascist sympathies. We'll see later that Herut, the party that Likud comes out of, their whole shtick is that we that they take by force, not just the whole what they call Eretz Israel, from from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea, but also the whole what used to be Transjordania.
60 seconds.
We'll see a map of that later, but it's this is why he supports all these wars. This is why he supports Hamas, because he wants never-ending war to expand. Thank you.
Thank you.
I heard in the clip that Netanyahu worked with forces to the right of the Likud, which the Likud had previously shunned. Now, my understanding was, I thought the Likud was pretty much the far right in Israel. So what in Israel is to the right of the Likud that he was working with?
Yeah, good question.
I know.
Really, it's the religious Zionists that have their own party that is not. Likud is technically a secular party, and there are Likud's a big party. There are more left wing, you could say, but they're really not left wing at all. But to Netanyahu, and some of them actually did not want him to go in with the right wing fascist parties.
Yeah, I want you to know there were fascist parties, actual fascist parties in Israel. And let me explain it to you. This may be news to everybody. Their problem with Hitler, not that he killed communists or trade unionists, but that he killed Jews. So if he stopped killing Jews, a fascist would be okay. That's what kind of sickness these people are. Thank you.
You have the floor.
I just thought it was interesting. I think it was a clip when Netanyahu was giving a speech in the 90s against the Oslo Accords because he was critical of the idea of the end of history, which was prevalent in the 90s with the fall of the Soviet Union, which we would agree with, but he was doing it in a way to say we can't give this land back to these people because we haven't reached the end of the history and they will use it against us in the future, which is something we would not agree with. We would. So I just thought that was interesting, and I wanted to point that out.
No, I'm glad you did. I noticed that too. This was happening right after the fall of the Soviet Union. I'm really quick, is there's another movie, actually, an Israeli movie called Incitement, that I would recommend everyone look at. It goes through the eyes of the assassin of Rabin, and it's called Incitement. You can find it on some stream. But look into that because it really does show the dynamics of Israel and the different parties. We're going to have to move on, unfortunately, so keep your hands up. We will have this next section to talk about the roots of Netanyahu's ideology. And we're going to ask some people to read for us. I think we have for the first section, first let's, first we're going to talk about
Jabotinsky, that's better, Jabotinsky. And revisionism, Irgun fascism, from an article in Jewish Life, 1947, called The Irgun Hoax by Catherine Wilson. Politically, the Irgun emerged from the revisionist movement, the Jewish form of reaction led by Vladimir Jabotinsky. In Palestine today, the Irgun placards the walls with posters hailing Jabotinsky as its prophet and proclaiming his inspiration of its revolt. Professor Johann Samertikow, a leading spokesman for the American League for a Free Palestine, makes the Irgun revisionist relationship clear. A group of revisionist youth organized an underground self-defense corps, which soon became famous as the Irgun Zvailemi, Revisionism early saw the need for such military organizations. One of the revisionist leaders was Abba Akamir, of whom Jablonski wrote in the New York Morning Journal in 1930, "I take my hat off to my friend and teacher Akamir. This friend and teacher proclaimed, we must create groups for action to exterminate the Histadrut, Jewish Federation of Labor, physically. They are worse than the Arabs. Bomb their gatherings." Around Jabotinsky's banner rallied the right wing of the Yishuv, which demanded a Palestine without socialist illusions and with unlimited possibilities for capitalist exploitation and profit. Revisionism called for a strong hand against Jewish workers. It fed on the widespread disillusionment with British policy, limited immigration, and growing poverty of the working class in the world economic crisis of the 30s. Revisionism proclaimed that the danger comes from within and identified the inner enemy as the worker. The attitude of revisionism towards the working class struggle is clearly indicated in its basic principles of revisionism, 1929, which states, differences between labor and capital are to be adjusted solely by means of compromise. The Yishuv must proclaim a national arbitration regime and create a system of national arbitral courts. Any infraction of the decision of the national arbitration bodies, i.e. lockouts, strikes, boycott of Jewish labor, are to be regarded as treason to the nation. At one Zionist Congress, a revisionist leader warned the workers' delegates, "Don't boast about your strength. There was a workers' movement in Germany, too, and it turned to dust and ashes overnight." Jabotinsky, canon saint of the Irgun, proclaimed, "Every labor strike is treason." He preached strike breaking. "I remove the moral stigma attaching to the expression of strike breaking in Palestine." He called the Histadrut this cursed cancer feeding on the body of the Yishuv. Under this indictment, his brown-shirted followers did not hesitate to put his precepts into action.
Thank you, Karen. Yeah, and so that is referring to the Histadrut, which is the biggest labor union in Israel. So you can see his fascist tendencies there. So next is going to be basically solidifying Netanyahu's ideology, where he's paying tribute to the fascist Jabotinsky.
היום בישיבת הממשלה החלטנו על הקמתו של מרכז מבקרים חדש במכון ז'בוטינסקי בתל אביב. מורשתו חובקת כל, פשוט חובקת את הכל. תוצג שם לראווה והיא תעשה נגישה לחוגים רחבים. שיעור קומתו של ז'בוטינסקי הולך וגדל עם השנים. רעיונותיו הלאומיים מטפסים לגבהים והם הופכים לנחלת הכלל. מתורתו אנו דולים מים חיים ושואבים עוז בשליחותנו להבטיח את עתיד האומה. יהי זכרו של זאב ז'בוטינסקי, איש הספרא והסייפא, ומאור ציוני ענק, ברוך לעולמי עד.
Okay, and let's see.
Okay.
Go ahead.
New Harut, the precursor. I'm sorry for my voice. Harut, the precursor to Likud, article by Isidore Abramovitz. New Palestine Party. Visit of Menachem Begin and Alma of Political Movement discuss. This is to the editor of the New York Times. Among the most disturbing political phenomena of our time is the emergence in the newly created state of Israel of the Freedom Party called the Herut, through Tower, a political party closely akin in its organization, methods, and political philosophy, and social appeal to the Nazi and fascist parties. It was formed out of the membership and following of the former Irgun Zohar Legumi, a terrorist, a right-wing chauvinist organization in Palestine. And there you see a picture of Menachem Begin, who, as you know in history, was later the head of Israel and a member of Likud. Herut, the precursor to Likud. The current visit of Menachem Begin, leader of this party, to the United States is obviously calculated to give the impression of American support for his Likud party in the coming Israeli elections, and to cement political ties with conservative, that's a key term, conservative Zionist elements in the United States. Several Americans of national repute have lent their names to welcome Menachem Begin's visit. It is inconceivable that those who oppose fascism throughout the world, if correctly informed as to Mr. Begin's political record and perspectives, could add their names and support to the movement he represents. And there you see a logo of the Irgun. The center is a map of Mandatory Palestine and the Emirate of Transjordan, representing the Irgun's goal to unite the whole land into Eretz Israel of Greater Israel. So their aim is to take out Jordan and everything. Thank you. Herut, the precursor to Likud. Before irreparable damage is done by way of financial contributions, public manifestations in Begin's behalf, and the creation in Palestine of the impression that a large segment of America supports fascist elements in Israel, the American public must be informed as to the record and objectives of Mr. Begin and his movement. The public avowals of Begin's party are no guide whatever to its actual character. Today, they speak of freedom, democracy, and anti-imperialism, whereas until recently, they openly preached the doctrine of the fascist state. It is in its actions that the terrorist party betrays its real character. From the past actions, we can judge what it may be expected to do in the future. And there you see the slogan of the Herut Party in 1958.
Herut, the precursor to Likud, continued. Quote, "Nothing has changed. Attack on Arab village. A shocking example was their behavior in the Arab village of Deir Yassin. This village, off the main roads and surrounded by Jewish lands, had taken no part in the war, and had even fought off Arab bands who wanted to use the village as their base. On April 9th, this is from the New York Times, terrorist bands attacked this peaceful village, which was not a military objective in the fighting, killing most of its inhabitants, 240 men, women, and children, and kept a few of them alive to parade as captives through the streets of Jerusalem. Most of the Jewish community was horrified at the deed, and the Jewish agency sent a telegram of apology to King Abdullah of Transjordan. But the terrorists, far from being ashamed of their act, were proud of their massacre. publicized it widely, and invited all the foreign correspondents present in the country to view the heaped corpses and the general havoc wreaked at Deir Yassin. Deir Yassin incident exemplifies, and there's an image there and of the Deir Yassin massacre of April 1948. The Deir Yassin incident exemplified the character and actions of the Freedom Party. Within the Jewish community, they have preached an admixture of ultra-nationalism, religious mysticism, and racial superiority. Like other fascist parties, they have been used to break strikes and have themselves pressed for the destruction of free trade unions. In their stead, they have proposed corporate unions on the Italian fascist model. During the last years of sporadic anti-British violence, the IZL and Stern groups inaugurated a reign of terror in the Palestine Jewish community. Teachers were beaten up for speaking against them. Adults were shot for not letting their children join them. By gangster methods, beatings, window smashings, and widespread robberies, the terrorists intimidated the population and exacted a heavy tribute. The people of the Freedom Party have had no part in the constructive achievements in Palestine. They have reclaimed no land, built no settlements, and only detracted from the Jewish defense activity. Their much publicized immigration and endeavors were minute and devoted mainly to bringing in fascist compatriots. Discrepancies seen. The discrepancies seen between the bold claims now made by Begin and his party and the record of past performance in Palestine bear the imprint of no ordinary political party. This is the unmistakable stamp of a fascist party for whom terrorism against Jews, Arabs, and British alike and misrepresentation are means, and a leader state is, and a quote, leader state is the goal. In the light of the foregoing considerations, it is imperative that the truth about Mr. Begin and his movement be made known in this country. It is all the more tragic that the top leadership of American Zionism has refused to campaign against Begin's efforts, even to expose its own constituents the danger to Israel from support of Begin. The undersigned therefore take this means of publicly presenting a few salient facts concerning Begin and his party, and of urging all concerned not to support this latest manifestation of fascism.
And now, just to end this section, we'll see if it wasn't solidified enough, Netanyahu's fascist roots. This should clarify that. But this is basically just a minute of Netanyahu whitewashing Hitler and what he did in the Holocaust.
Hitler didn't want to exterminate the Jews at the time. He wanted to expel the Jews. And Haj Amin al-Husseini went to Hitler and said, if you expel them, they'll all come here. So what should I do with them? He asked. He said, burn them. היטלר הוא אחראי לפתרון הסופי להשמדת 6 המיליונים, הוא קיבל את ההחלטה.
So there you see that he's using the Arabs as the scapegoat for Hitler's decision, which, yeah, that's just not correct. So
Hitler didn't.
all right, now let's break for another discussion. I know there were a lot of hands.
All right, so first I had something on that last section, you know, something that I noticed, a trend. You know, the first Hamas attacks after the Oslo Accords came, you know, at a time when Netanyahu's political aspirations were basically non-existent at that time. And then now October 7th came at a time when Netanyahu's political career was in a crosshairs. You know, almost seems a little too coincidental that both happened at when Netanyahu needed a bump. And of course, Tyler mentioned in his comments earlier that I don't remember seeing in the presentation Netanyahu's connections to the funding of Hamas early on, especially. And then, of course, you see here in this last section, they're talking about the fascists wanted to completely wipe out the Histadrut, which is Israel's version of the AFL-CIO. And, you know, I just want to note that a lot of leftists here want the labor movement here to cut ties with the Histadrut as well. But that's not the correct way to go. We must push for the left elements of the labor movement to ball from within to take over the Histadrut, just like we are doing with the AFL.
Thank you on that. Yep, absolutely. You know, there was a general strike that happened only for a day. You can argue that the leadership of the Histadrut did it for cynical reasons, but that doesn't mean that we should just stop trying to organize with the Histadrut.
Those noble Europeans could not possibly commit any crimes, so they needed those sly savages to tell them to do it.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of just racist stuff that Netanyahu has spouted.
Yes, like how there seemed to be peace in Syria, and yet suddenly Al-Qaeda has done a sarin gas attack that was blamed on by Assad, and that's why we need to start pouring weapons into these moderate rebels in Syria. It's funny how that keeps happening. My other question was, I believe his name was Ben Gurion. He was, I forget if he's currently in the cabinet with Netanyahu, but he was a part of that far right in the 90s. And I believe there's a photo of him around holding a piece of Rabin's car saying, well, this is going to be him next around as a trophy. And I think the guy is the defense minister, but
yes, he is.
Had these far right ties that go back so far, and yeah, no, this class has been very enlightening and just showing all that. Thank you.
Do you have his full name, Tyler? Go ahead.
Well, the name is Ben Gvir, not Ben Gurion. That was first prime minister of Israel. He was part of the labor Zionists.
Yeah, that's who I meant. Sorry.
But yeah, I don't have his full name, just Ben Gvir. That's what he's known as.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and we'll have a little section about the far right again.
The Histadrut instigated a general strike, which was squashed pretty quick. But I wonder, with the Likud as a fascist or party heading towards fascism today, are they doing anything further to suppress the Histadrut at this point?
What I could tell you is over the years, the Histadrut has lost its membership. It is still the biggest union and employer. I'll have to look up it used to be the biggest employer for Israel. I could look into that a little bit more unless someone else could speak, but over the years, it has been that, yes, to dismantle them. But I can't speak about recently. Go ahead.
I want to mention how they need each other. They feed off each other. The ultra left and the ultra right. They come together eventually because their main enemy is the center. Remember that, always in history. The main enemy of the two extremes is the center. So you have a situation where do they come together? The issue of free Palestine. The ultra right in Israel says no Palestinian state, and the ultra left, the ones that were responsible for the October 7th event, what are they saying? That they do not want a two-state solution. That's where they come together. They both do not want a two-state solution, but they want perpetual war. Thank you.
Okay. But we're gonna get to the last section here, which is just now talking about the liberators against Netanyahu's oppression. We'll mention Hadash, a bit of the PLO, and also the Palestinian People's Party. But to start, we're going to start with what Hadash is. It's the Jewish Arab Democratic Front for Peace and Equality. The party was formed in 1977 in the presence of the growing threat to democratic freedoms, the danger of fascist dictatorship, and by the concern of extremist right-wing forces seizing power. It emphasizes workers' rights, Jewish-Arab cooperation, and its leaders were among the first to support a two-state solution. So my understanding, this was when Menachem Begin became the prime minister, and that's the response. And so this would have been the first time actually when Likud or Harut, the predecessor, had a prime minister. Beforehand, it was the Labor Zionist parties. Their platform is based on Jewish Arab unity and for the defense of democratic freedoms and equal rights. So parts of this is from their website, translated from Hebrew. We thought these were some important points to just point out, that Hadash is the most consistent movement in defending the principles of just peace, the interests of workers, and those of the Arab population in Israel. Hadash works systematically for unity of struggle, and they this is part of it. We call on all who agree with Hadash's principles, Jews and Arabs, women and men, to support it in the elections in Israel and to take part in its activities and struggle. Hadash's partners are the Israeli Communist Party, local fronts for peace, public circles, and Jewish and Arab figures. And then moving on, in the upcoming Knesset elections, we have a faithful responsibility to save both peoples in the country from the disastrous policies of the right-wing government led by Netanyahu, which led to the wars in Gaza. Now, this was written in 2019, my understanding, which deepens the occupation and expands the settlements while removing the chance of peace with the Palestinians, which exasperates the discrimination and dispossession of the Arab population, which expands unemployment and destroys education and health services, which imposes corrupt and unacceptable norms of governance. Right-wing governments in the past 2 decades have enriched the upper echelon through privatization and tax reforms and have exacerbated poverty and social distress in Israel. So here's a campaign video that we found that they probably had on Israeli TV, because they are a party. They have 5 members in their coalition. It's Ta'al and his Hadash, and there are 120 Knesset members.
أكثر ما يشغلنا هو تثبيت شرعيتنا وتعزيز تأثيرنا وضمان حقوق أبنائنا وبناتنا في هذا الوطن.
نحن أصحاب قضية، حقوقنا مشتقة من انتمائنا لوطننا. المساواة القومية والمدنية، الواحدة تكمل الأخرى.
בשביל לחולל מהפכות חייבים לצאת מאזור הנוחות. ללכת נגד הזרם, להיאבק למען שותפות, שוויון מלא לכל האזרחים.
التحديات الكبيرة تزيدنا إصرارا على بذل كل الجهود لربط الشعبي بالبرلماني والسياسي بالشخصي والقومي باليومي. هم الناس هو همنا.
يحاولوا ينزعوا شرعيتنا. مع كل هجمة عنصرية نثبت في الأرض أكثر. البقاء والمواطنة مش للمساومة. نحن هنا وهنا سنبقى. من أجل العدالة الاجتماعية.
لإلغاء قانون القومية.
מול הגזענות בונים שותפות.
من أجل المساواة القومية والمدنية.
למען שלום צודק.
Okay. So most things we can find were from 2019. Definitely we can relate it to today. I think that's important to show because I think a lot of the media that we see today, even on social media, the alternative media, really paints Israel as this hegemony that is all just Jewish, because most of those members there were actually Arab Israeli. And the one guy that we'll be talking about in this is Ofer Kasef. He's actually Jewish. And it really actually dispels that myth. There are Arabs and Jewish people that are actually for a two-state solution, and they see that in the best interests. This interview is really interesting, given by the Knesset member, Ofer Kasef, in London. He's currently there because he's been disbarred from speaking in the Knesset. But he's talking here about the fascist rise in Israel and this really alarming, I guess, plan that the far right, you see, we mentioned him earlier, that's the defense minister. There's the financial minister, and then there's Netanyahu. And these two on the left and right are in the extreme religious Zionist party. So we'll play this a little bit.
In 2017, Bezalel Smotrich, who then was a backbencher, but now is a minister of finance and also a minister within the Ministry of Defense, published publicly, you can even find it in English on the internet, the so-called decisive plan or subjugation plan. And this plan has basically three main elements. First, he called upon the Israeli government to annex the all occupied Palestinian territories without, of course, granting basic rights to the Palestinians. That means, of course, official apartheid, because practically it exists already. The second point was that those Palestinians who are not going to accept their status as subjects rather than citizens are going to be expelled from their homeland. And the third point was, although implicitly, but very clearly, that those who are going to resist are going to be killed. Now, what I said 1 year ago, as I said 2 or 3 weeks after the massacre by Hamas, is that the government of Israel wants to use the crimes committed by Hamas as an excuse to pursue with the very same plan, that decisive plan. To use the smokescreen and to use it as an excuse to pursue with the very same plan. The government already began to realize that plan by the so-called judicial reform, which was actually a sugar-coated term of a coup d'etat that the government began to pursue before October 7th. This coup was, which is still on, perhaps we talk about it later, this coup was intended not only to turn Israel into a fascist regime and even fascist society by persecuting political opponents of the government, silencing of the opposition, the real opposition, etc. But that was the means. The end of this coup was to eliminate those factors that can block the decisive plan. That is independent judiciary, independent media, public opinion, etc. Limiting or even abolishing the right to demonstrate, to strike, etc., etc. That it was actually the attempt of the government then. But all those were not only only ends in themselves, but also means to realize the decisive plan. In the last year, we see that this is exactly what I said 1 year ago. What they've been doing now, the government, and unfortunately, part of the opposition in the parliament support them, is exactly that. They are they are pursuing a genocide, an ethnic cleansing in Gaza, ethnic cleansing in the West Bank as well, massacre and destruction in Lebanon, and turning Israel into a full-fledged fascist regime. That's exactly what they've been doing. The plan eventually is the decisive plan.
Okay, so there you see him talking about this alarming thing, and he was talking about these far-right Knesset members that were trying to implement that plan, and they've been successful because of Netanyahu's far-right government. And so finally, we just want to leave with some of those Maccabee, or we would call them modern-day Maccabees of Palestine and Israel. So we do see these peace movements, as we just discussed, forming around a two-state solution. They also bring up the ICC arrest warrants for Netanyahu and the international response to the genocide in the Gaza Strip. And so we just want to commemorate them. We have some of the Hadash members that we just mentioned, our Ida Toma Sleiman, and Ayman Odeh. He's the leader of the Hadash party, and then Ofer Kassif, who was just speaking there. That we also couldn't get to the Palestinian liberation struggles and the parties there, but we do want to mention the Palestinian People's Party and Dr. Akil Takas, who's the international secretary of that party, and Bassem As-Sali, the general secretary, which, to my understanding, is still the general secretary of June of this year, but it's been difficult to get in contact with these. As you can see, there's lots of distress in Palestine, in both the Gaza Strip and in the West Bank. So that is what we will end with. I do want to get to our last round of discussions in the 5 minutes we have. Yeah, I want to get to you first since you haven't spoken yet. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, it was very interesting, especially how other comrades put it, how the ultra left and the far right, they almost like the far right's taking them for a ride. Like, I guess not that their interests align. Also, I'm gonna try and collect my thoughts and say this quickly. But I don't know, like on certain things they coincide, like opposing the two-state solution, which with the Oslo Accords in the 90s, when it seemed like the peace movement was making a lot of progress. Obviously, you had these events, and I forgot who said it earlier, that when these terrorist attacks happened, it rallied a lot of support around the far right. And it's not a coincidence that, like how they said earlier, it's not a coincidence that the first time Netanyahu came to power, when it seemed like he was dead to rights, that's what happened, and that's what ended up saving him. And now we're seeing the same thing. But no, yeah, that just the ultra left, they just play into these people's hands. And like, I don't know, I see a lot of people here in the US being like, oh, we can't support anything that has to do with Israel, whether it's the Histadrut or like more peace-oriented parties, or parties that are actually willing to or want a two-state solution, because most of Israeli society is not benefiting from these far-right policies that are like Netanyahu saying that I'm here to protect you. In fact, it's quite funny when he's saying I'm here to protect you, you need somebody to be threatening you in order for him to be telling you that, and that to have any
90 seconds.
Yep. And I'll just end it there. Yeah, like, I don't know, he wants a threat to be there, because if he's telling you I'm going to protect you and there's no threat, and obviously a two-state solution would bring Israelis and Palestinians closer to working together and seeing that they're not trying to kill us all on either side.
Absolutely. And sorry to cut, because you just remind me, when I was going through, there was so much too. I'm so glad I don't have to watch any more documentaries about Netanyahu. I'm sick of looking at him. But the thing that I noticed about these is they did not really go into the economic crisis of Israel. And I saw one, I think it was from Hadash, put out an article of just how many people are in poverty today. And you think of like, or US election, what just happened. They never talked about economics. And I think that was a huge factor in a lot of this. As you see, he tried to dismantle the socialist, I guess you could say, economy of Israel. But let's try to get these last hands.
On the, I thought that was kind of funny that the descriptor they chose to use for the Israeli economy was socialist. But another thing that I wanted to ask about was the ultra left position as presented is one state. So um, where does where does Hamas fit, since they currently support a two-state solution? Since like
Yeah, and they've talked. I think the best thing I could direct you to is to the Beijing Declaration, which had 14 different Palestinian parties, including Hamas, who signed it. But yeah, we can't really.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to say, the ultra left, they framed us as both sidesing this issue, that we were shaming both sides of the house, Hamas and the current Israeli regime. However, we weren't both sidesing it. As we were very clearly seeing, they are the same side. In every meaningful way, Hamas and Netanyahu work together to prevent any progress. During the Syrian civil war, Hamas was fighting alongside the Free Syrian Army to topple the Assad government. And after the HTS group, what used to be the Al-Nusra Front, which is Al-Qaeda, they actually greeted them. They congratulated them for toppling the Assad regime. Assad was one of the biggest supporters of the Palestinian struggle. So it's, all these pieces come together, and it's just very clear that Hamas was never a liberating force, and it's the opposite arm of Netanyahu.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's important to end on. So, the fight continues. I think we try to, as UJPFO, want to get more involved with our own government bodies and try to put pressure on them to stop sending weapons to Israel. That is really what we can do here in the US. But I do have to end, unfortunately. Thank you for everyone that made it. Happy Hanukkah, everyone, and a Happy New Year. It looks like the menorah is out, but really do take care. Thanks for making it to our last Jewish People Shul class this year. Thank you, everyone.